Lastly, external presentation. By that, we're talking about taking that final product and obviously presenting it to whoever it may be, your ultimate audience. So when we're talking about choosing hardware or software or using these things internally, we're looking at three key groups. The first group, typically the partners and the decision makers at the firm, are the ones in charge of the cost. So you have to think now, if you're not the person who's actually making that call and maybe you're here to give recommendations, and you're looking at, well, should I go Mac, should I go PC? Should I think about PowerPoint or Keynote, etc.? You have to think about the cost. Traditionally, Macs are more expensive than PC initially. Traditionally, they don't require as much upkeep as PC. So these are things to consider. The second group is implementation. These are your IT people. Do you have an existing network? What's it going to take to incorporate that into your practice? You can't just go willy-nilly and buying new technologies without making sure that they talk with the other technologies you've already incorporated into your practice. One key example that I give of this is, my firm upgraded its internal software and its email programs, and all of a sudden now I wasn't getting calendaring information on my smartphone that I relied on. Almost missed a hearing because of it. So it's important to understand that when you're upgrading one thing, it can affect something completely different. Now that wasn't their fault. It turns out it was something that I had done on my end. But these are factors to consider when incorporating technology into any firm. And then finally, usage. And you'll see the woman throwing up her hands there. If you introduce anything new into a practice, there will be people that will throw their hands up. Okay? That's with anything new. That's what's called a learning curve. And I talked about that earlier. If you have a learning curve, sometimes, and again, this is part of the analysis that one has to go through when deciding about the incorporation of technology into your practice. When you have that learning curve, there are many times, certainly with technology, where the learning curve is worth it. Where the people that do this eventually do that. They drop their hands. And it makes it worth it because that's the point where everything picks up and goes faster. Saves you time, saves you money, and as attorneys, makes you more effective. Now, when you get to the external presentation, before we get there. In making these decisions, this is the age-old question of Mac versus PC, like I've been saying. Whether or not you want the desktop Mac or the Dell, whether you want to be using PowerPoint or Keynote, it's kind of like there's this domino effect. Once you go one route, the rest follow. And then there is so many other concepts that usually your IT person figures out. But if you're on the smaller scale or a solo person or you're in a smaller firm, then a lot of times you don't have that kind of IT support that a big firm might have to really think about everything. But it's important that you understand that these concepts and that these conflicts can and do exist so that you know at least to ask the questions when making these decisions. Now moving on to external presentation, the entire audience focus shifts now. Instead of looking at your internal group, now you're looking at juries, judges, and mediators. Typically, I mean, you can also be looking at clients, you could be looking at expert witnesses, etc., as far as who you're presenting to and what you're presenting. And when I think about these groups, now I'm not calling them monkeys by any respect. If you can see here, it's the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. But there are many, many studies out there that show that people learn different ways. Some people like to look at things. Some people understand things better when it's spoken to them. Some people, they need to write it down and it sticks with them. So when I say know your audience, in this respect, know that the more senses that you hit in doing these presentations and incorporating technology into your practice, if you can get that audio perception, if you can get the visuals down, if you can hit as many senses as possible, you will get the maximum audience comprehension. And the only way that I know of that you can do that is through technology. By using Keynote, for example, I'm showing you visuals. I'm speaking to you audibly. If you're on a webinar, you can be writing things down at the same time. Goes for in-trial as well. It's all the same concept, but just by putting images up on the board and by having them move around, now I'm engaging a different sense. And by speaking and moving my hands, I'm from the East Coast, that's what I do, I hope to be engaging you a little bit more than maybe some other presentations do where you're just sitting there and somebody's just droning on in the background. Hopefully, maybe not, and if not, I apologize. So that's rule number 2, know to your audience. Next up is rule number 3, which is the rule of 3. Now, I'm not sure why this is. I did not create the human brain, but I have to accept it as fact because I've seen it work time and again, and that is the rule of 3. When things are grouped into groups of 3, it has been found in scientific studies by people far smarter than me to be inherently more effective, and the audience is more likely to consume the information. It's just a fact. I don't know how to say it any better than that, and there are tons of examples of this. For example, slogans, go, fight, win. There is the traditional 3-pane comic strip. That one I like. Will you publish my short stories? No, the end. In acting, and a lot of this storytelling concept comes from acting, you have your 3-act structure. It's interesting that there's 4 parts there, but Act 1 is the introduction, 2, development, 3, climax. Biblical stories, you have the 3 wise men. In children's cartoons or stories, you have 3 Little Pigs. Popular media, that's Three's Company. And if you can think about it, if you recall way back when I went over these concepts, I used the rule of 3. Know your audience. Hardware, software, internal use, external use. I showed you 3 key groups: cost, implementation, usage. When we went to external, I showed you another 3 key groups: jury, judge, and mediator. And even when I talked about how those people learn, I showed you the 3 monkeys. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Rule of 3. It's everywhere. You probably don't even realize it. So if you have a group of 3, or if you have a group and you're showing a list, try and get it in 3s, because as every child of the 80s knows, 3 is in fact the magic number. The 4th rule, moving right along, is keep it simple. While it is certainly your option to write down every little thing you plan on saying, then place it into your trial presentation, those from whom I learned how to give presentations, and literally everyone else who knows the best way to give presentations such as these, all agree that doing so is a complete waste of time. The point of audio-visual presentation programs like PowerPoint and Keynote are to provide the audience with simple graphical representations of the key concepts you're trying to convey. These programs should not be used as read-along, follow-the-bouncing-ball aids to your audience members who, in all probability, are neither kindergarten students nor likely to still be paying attention by the time you're done reading to them, and have probably finished reading what you've written before you've finished speaking the words out loud in any event. You get what I'm saying? Has everyone seen something like this before? Please don't do it. The text and the text and the text, and somebody just droning on who's just spewing out everything you're reading anyway. It insults my intelligence, quite frankly. It's lazy. If somebody has a presentation, they have their outline, and all they have figured out to do with a keynote presentation or a PowerPoint presentation like this is to put little bullet points in front of their little outline and then sit there and read you exactly what they've written, it's insulting to me, but I'm weird like that. One of the examples of this that I came across in my everyday life, my wife actually sells jewelry through a company called Stella & Dot, and typically their advertising materials are actually very clean and very effective, I find. I mean, jewelry's not my thing, it's hers. But in some of the materials that they give to their salespeople, there's a PowerPoint presentation, and just for laughs, I thought I'd take a look, and I was not shocked at all to find exactly the same type of stuff that I'm sure all of you have seen, no matter how many CLE presentations that you've taken. It's always the same thing. I can give this presentation because I can just read it to you. Our executive service pledge to you is an irresistible product and a love-marked brand and unparalleled e-business platform. I could have read that. They can read that. Don't do it. Please don't do it, okay? Keep it simple. Do what I have done before. Take simple graphical representations of your concepts and then use the spoken word to convey the concepts beyond what is simply put up here, okay? Text doesn't get it done. You need some, but don't rely on text. Images, far more effective and far simpler. Another great example of what not to do, and it's far easier to find these than the right ones, is the spaghetti slide. Most people haven't heard of the spaghetti slide. This is kind of what it looks like. It was something created by the United States government in a presentation to explain what was going on during the conflict in Afghanistan. And as you can see by the lines and the hash marks and the different colors, it just looked like a bowl of spaghetti. Now, by looking at this, the goal in any presentation should be able to look at it and get a sense of what's going on. Got me. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, here's what it actually looked like. Now that is a bowl of spaghetti. This is just a mess. I want to stick a fork in here, and it makes me hungry for dinner, quite frankly. Okay? But and this is vastly complex stuff and far above my head, but taking one look at this, I can see easily how this can be simplified. And again, this was a big piece of poster board that was put in front of people. I'm going to show you how technology makes it simpler. And it should pop. Look, they color-coded it for us. They gave us big letters that showed each of our main topics. So when you look at it from that perspective and you pull it out, now all of a sudden we've got, hey, coalition, ANSF, government, insurgents, population. 5 topics. So let's get rid of them. That's what your first slide looks like from the spaghetti slide. And then go from there. Take each one. How about top 5 tips and tricks for fighting the war in Afghanistan? Number 1, coalition. And make it more and more complex. And that comes to the reverse pyramid, which we'll be talking about later on. I took that and I made it 5 words across the top of the screen. That's why technology helps, because you can't take a static image and convey, with all of that information, and convey it in a way that makes sense. But with something like Keynote or PowerPoint, you can have it move, you can have it simplified in a way that people will understand it a heck of a lot better than that mess. And the funny thing is, in true government fashion, they actually did distill it. They just shoved it in the corner and made it really teeny tiny. But they had all those concepts up there. But there's just no way to see it. Again, using technology and using it effectively, it's so, so important. 5th rule, the reverse pyramid. Like I said, and this is a key rule in journalism. I have a journalism background as well, and the first thing they teach you is reverse pyramid. When you write a story, when you present anything to your audience, you have to expect that their attention span is just going to go, and they're only going to read the first few sentences. So what you have to do is you have to put the most important stuff at the top, and then you order it by lower and lower importance as you go. So here we go, rule of 3s. There's 3 levels of this. The first one is take your must-have conclusions at the top. Okay? If I have a case and I've got all of my elements of liability, and then I have damages, my must-have conclusions are he's liable, and here's how much I've been damaged. That's it, not the individual elements. Your must-have conclusion, if you want them to leave with one conclusion, he's liable and he caused damage. Second, helpful, not necessary. Okay? If somebody has concluded that the defendant is liable and has caused damage, do we really care whether or not they get all the elements? Probably not. Okay? Now, of course, this is a simplified topic. Of course, you have to go through the elements when you're talking about a closing argument, for example. So something helpful but not necessary is exactly that, going through each of those elements and saying, there's a duty, causation, breach, etc. Lastly, 3rd is, well, it'd be nice if they knew it, but if they don't come away with it, then great. The specific facts that caused the element to be satisfied or not. That's what we're talking about. So you'll notice that in each of these rules, when I go through each one of them, I start with a title. What's the one thing I want you to take away from this part? Reverse pyramid. Okay? Then, what was helpful, not necessary? Most important, least important. Then finally, it'd be nice if you remember this stuff, but you probably won't, what the 3 stages are and what their titles are. So hopefully